So, welcome to this guest lecture from Gavriil Papadiotis about camera as a tool for design. Gavriil is an architectural photographer for interior, and he has specialized in light and architecture. He was originally trained as an electrical engineer and worked at the lighting laboratory of the National Technical University while getting his master's in engineering. But Gavriil was very much fascinated by light and space, and for that reason, he applied at the Bartlett School of Graduate Studies in UCL in London and did his master's in light and building before he started his career being an actual lighting designer in this field. And he was involved in numerous projects around the world, ranging from high-end hotels to residential developments, restaurants, art galleries. But his passion is really photography, and he has collaborated with many architects and interior designers, as well as different brands to capture these moments of light and space. And his portfolio includes numerous projects like the Acropolis lighting, the award-winning photos from the Kimpton Fitzroy Hotel in London or the National Museum in Qatar. And I was very fortunate that I had the chance at ERCO to coordinate several lighting projects with him and in Europe and in Middle East. So I'm looking very much forward to this talk, and he will tell us something about the camera as a tool for design. So it's up to you now, Gavriil. Thank you very much for taking the time to inspire us.
No, it's, yeah, I'll try to inspire. Let's see how it goes. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for having me. I think both lighting and photography is a topic that I love talking about, and basically I've been in the field for quite a few years now. As you said, I did start as an engineer, and then I kind of made the leap into a lighting designer, and then that led me into taking photos of architectural projects. So that's been an interesting sort of career path so far that I've chosen. But let's see how, let's see how I can share about my experiences with you guys. It's been a pleasure to join you today. I wanna talk about photography in general and how I visually document architectural projects. Well, in a nutshell, it's kind of how I struggle to capture the right light at the right time, and that's always the case. Just chasing lighting, either that's sunrise or sunset, or like a blue sky with the lights of the building just slowly coming up. As I said, I would like to thank Thomas for the kind invitation and Professor Vos for having me in this course, and I'll try my best to keep you guys interested and entertained maybe. Let's see how I can change the slide. Right. So before I started doing photography, I was working quite a few years as an architectural photographer. And I was trying today to decide whether I should go more of a technical kind of route in terms of photography, or whether I should try to do more of a creative kind of inspirational kind of path. So I have decided to keep things a bit more simple and a bit a bit more interesting, sorry, and try to show you how I photograph different kinds of projects using examples of my work. Now projects can be anything from an airport, a museum, a hotel resort, a small restaurant, or even documenting the past few months, last year, the new Acropolis lighting in Athens. Just as a small intro, this presentation cover that I use, I've been actually using for quite a few years now. I haven't changed it, and I'll explain why. I took this photo of this light bulb shaped staircase, I think in 2016, and that's in the House of the Black Madonna in Prague. And hopefully you can also see why, but basically in my mind, this image illustrates perfectly the harmony that can exist between lighting and architecture. I mean, if you spot the light, dark sort of gradients from the center to the edges of the photo, I think that's a very unique kind of design. So today my focus will be to talk about lighting and architecture through my own viewfinder, and how I try not to just create images, but also design and visual content for the projects that I work on. A very short backstory about myself. My first degree was in electronic and computer engineering, and it was extremely technical. And I wouldn't say boring, it was very interesting, but I was kind of lacking the inspirational kind of side of things. I wanted something a bit more creative. So during my 5th and final year of university, I was working at the lighting laboratory. I was developing an image algorithm that would actually automatically detect straight lanes, and it would perform real-time illuminance measurements using the camera's live feed. The system since then has been further developed, and it's actually been used the past few years to automate both street and tunnel lighting measurements. And I think it was at that time that I actually built my technical foundation on photography and imaging in general. But as I said, I felt this was lacking a bit of creativity in terms of having more of a design aspect. So at that point, I decided to move to London and pursue a career in lighting design after doing a master's degree at the Bartlett UCL. And at that point, I actually started paying more attention to the aesthetics of good lighting. So a bit of a background check. This is definitely not my big fat Greek wedding kind of moment, but photography does come from the word phos, which is genitive of light. That means, phos, that means light, and graphy, that means representation by means of lines or drawing. So photography translates as drawing with light. Moving on to architecture, it comes from the word, the Latin word architectura, which consists, again, from two Greek words. The first one is archi, which means first or leading. And the second one is techni or tektoniki, which is art or creation. So architecture is the art and the science that is leading the design and planning. And these are the main elements that need to be, in my mind, reproduced with architectural photography. Anything that comes from planning and design. And I think it is important that the photos that we make are capable of illustrating both the aesthetics and the functionality of a subject or a building. Photography's main instrument is the camera. And although a camera does remain the perfect perspectivist tool, capable of copying reality in its slightest detail, it has long been recognized for its ability to emancipate itself from mere reproduction in order to detach itself from reality and actually produce more mental images. So the cameras we're using, and that can be any camera really, it can be your phone, it can be a DSLR, anything really, allow us to manipulate both light and time in order to create memorable moments in a unique way, which bears great resemblance how lighting designers or designers in general use contrast and color, light and darkness to create unique spaces and more memorable experiences. So heading back to London, what we selectively choose to light, or in these systems take a photo of, is basically what we're trying for people to experience first. That's the main goal. But so by guiding the viewer's attention to parts of an image or a space, we're actually to direct the attention there, and perspective is everything. And this is the Tower Bridge in London from sort of different sort of angles the past few years. There are so many ways to manipulate an image in order to convey a message. I mean, it doesn't have to be extremely realistic sometimes. Occasionally, I do find myself sort of trying different things, and it's funny because photography has within its DNA the ability to cast a new light on the everyday and posit as essential qualities of the medium, which when added to the mystery and the magic of the darkroom, or well, in these days, more of a digital software, it can result in the kind of fully autonomous, complete and self-contained new works. Sorry. Now, images have amazing storytelling capabilities, and I would like to take a moment and walk you through a very specific image that I made a while back. So the woman in the red dress is standing in the brighter part of the image on the right-hand side, and it's usually what people see first, especially with everything else in the image being desaturated and just having the red dress popping. This is what kind of draws your eyes. Then what probably you're going to start noticing is that people's silhouettes kind of walking around the red lady. This shot was specifically taken, I think it was like a two-second exposure, like long expose, to achieve this ghostly effect, so other people are not so distracting for the viewer. You might even recognize the space this was taken. That's the Tate Modern, the new section of it, and it's actually a landmark of its own. I mean, it's a very recognizable staircase. Now, when your eyes keep looking at this image, I think you're going to start kind of exploring more to the left, which is slightly brighter than the right-hand side. So that means that there's a lift lobby in the background that does now have much more interest on the right-hand side, which is relatively dark. Then you kind of follow the curved line of the staircase, kind of going up, and that leads you back to the main focal point, which is the girl, and you kind of keep going in that sort of loop, going around and around and around, and that was kind of intentional. But if you start looking a bit closer to the left, there is actually a guy. There's a man who decided to stand still at that point, and he's more visible than the rest of the people, like these silhouettes, which kind of make him part of the photo. He's kind of like the second sort of subject, like not the lead protagonist, but he's actually there if you do notice him. And I'm going to quote Jean Renoir when he said that you control everything with photography, you plan everything, but you always leave a door open for reality to enter. And in this instance, I wasn't intending for this guy to be visible, but basically he is telling a parallel story by just standing there and just standing still. This is actually the original photo before any sort of editing happened. And what I was trying to say before is that when you carefully expose a photograph and selectively doing an edit afterwards, the final image creates specific points of interest. And that process is very similar to designing the lighting for a project, because basically you get to choose what to light, you get to choose what you leave in the shadow, and basically everything in between. So as Louis Bolt, a visual artist and photographer, said once, photography is the only deductive art, because every other art begins with a topic tabula rasa, a blank sheet of A4 paper, or a theater waiting for dancers or lighting or actors. But photography always begins with a world that's occasionally overfull. And what we're trying to achieve is kind of sort out what is more meaningful for us at that sort of moment. Now, while working as a lighting designer, as I said before, I realized the importance of having a best record possible of the work we're doing. I mean, sometimes things move too fast and you want to keep a record of how a project processed, because you want to be able to kind of, a few years later, go back and, just see what worked, what didn't, how things moved on from a concept stage to the final sort of stage. So it took me a while to realize that, but for a few years, I was subconsciously putting quite a lot of effort in learning how to aesthetically and technically combine the two things that I kind of love the most, which is lighting and photography. So nowadays, with my design experience and the passion that I have for both photography and film, I try to I work with a lot of architects and interior designers and try to offer architectural, interior, and product photography services, and try to kind of capture their vision when I'm photographing a project. So I'm gonna walk you through a couple of projects and try to explain how I do approach them in terms of what I photograph first, how I do a bit of reference, what do I pay attention to at the beginning. So this is, starting with France, this is a convent located in Toulouse, the Couvent des Jacobins, excuse my French. And I could go on for hours about the power of social media these days and how the past few years they have radically changed not only our access to visual information, but most importantly, our expectations for design content. It's actually crazy these days. It was actually quite a few years ago, I think in 1928, when Alexander Rotenskos, in his essay against the synthetic portrait for the snapshot, he explained that in order to gain a more concrete understanding of a person or a situation, or in our instance, a space, one must look not at a specific snapshot, but a group of images. So by acknowledging the shortcomings of a single image, both invite us, the viewer, to think about the space outside of the frame and the importance of having various images viewed in a sequence. So a single image might be 1,000 words, and photography is an extremely powerful tool when it comes to when used correctly, but we must always set the scene for the viewer and try to kind of present a project in a specific sort of order in order for us to make sense. So starting, it is always useful to give a bit of context, an explanation of where we are and what exactly is happening. And then, of course, don't get me wrong, I mean, having those amazing wide angle shots to actually show a space, it's always very powerful. But we always want to go occasionally deeper into details and sort of try to see how the lighting changes of space and how it's been transformed throughout the day. And I mean, if you have a look at this beautiful ceiling, it's amazing during the day, but when you have a dull day, you can't really see all of those details in the ceiling frescoes. So in this specific project, I tried to take some before and after shots, just to show what the lighting looked like before any of the spotlights were added on top of the joinery on the sides. And this is very powerful just to show you what difference lighting can make in a very, it's not a very small space, but it does transform the building itself. So after that, I always try to move a step closer, and I personally try and capture some more intriguing details, some close-ups of specific lighting effects. Because I mean, it's always a shame just, leaving a project, you're never gonna go back, or it's gonna be a few years, and not having, detailed photos of your work and how, things looked at different kind of, parts of the day, and how lighting made the difference that you were intending at the concept stage. And then as a lighting designer, I would always take photos of the lighting equipment as well. And then you try to show the details, how you conceal the wiring, how everything, integrates within the joinery and the architecture. Because at the end of the day, you want to show the lighting, you don't want to show the equipment. You want people to be looking at the building, not just gear. Now, I mean, this is well known. I'm not kind of discovering the wheel here, but basically, adding human scale to a few photos is always very important, especially in a few projects where looking at a wide angle image, you can't really tell how big the space is, if it's like a double or triple height ceiling. You always want to have a person walking or standing, just kind of to show scale, and also adding a bit of like sentiment and like human element inside the photos. And then because of social media again, these days I do try to take a couple of quick behind the scene videos. I'm not sure if, I think they do look a bit choppy, but hopefully you can see them. But basically what I want to achieve is that you have clients and people that follow you on social media that want to relate to you and your work. They want to see how you work behind the scenes. And these teaser videos are always interesting just to reveal part of your craft. Because I mean, showing just the final photo doesn't really tell too much about the effort that goes behind making all those photos. And of course, the designer and the design team. Now, in this specific project, that is a video. Hopefully that's gonna play well. So in this specific project, there was a whole lighting sequence that would kind of, you have spotlights on the side that would come on and off and would light different parts of the ceiling. And you can always take a video of that. And that's always very important. But sometimes what I find more interesting is actually try to take different photos of the different sort of lighting scenes, because in post-production, you have more freedom to change the timing, the intensity, and anything really of how the lighting changes, just to kind of replicate that effect. And also these days you have much higher image resolution and quality when you do that in photos instead of just static video. Now moving on to a more recent project, that is the Acropolis Styling that took place, the new design last year by Eleftheria Deco and her associates. This is in Athens, Greece. And basically, this was a kind of a large-scale project. I think it's the first one that I've been working on for like 5 or 6 consecutive months. And it took a lot of time and effort just to understand this sort of massive project, how it works, which angles you need to capture, that you need to have photos of the before lighting, the after lighting, different sort of viewing angles, photos during the day, photos of the team installing the lighting, photos during the night doing the light tests. So it was a 5 or 6 month process that actually I think I was able to follow along because I've seen it from a designer's point of view, and also as a photographer, trying to have an idea of what's going to work in the end, what you want to show, and actually the tremendous amount of effort that goes from a lot of people in such a huge kind of effort. And I have put together, I'm not going to talk too much about this one. I have put together a few photos that I took during the course of the project. These are photos from the end of the project, mainly from like a vantage point where you could see the lighting from different sort of key points in Athens. And then moving on to a couple of close-up photos from the top of the Parthenon, where it's fun enough, you don't really experience these things these days because you can't really visit it after hours, but it's interesting to see how beautiful the stone looks and how this amazing landmark has completely changed and it has come to life by, I wouldn't say simply changing the lighting because it's an amazing amount of effort that went into the project, but lighting makes all the difference when the sun comes down. And these are some more photos of the process at design stage, focusing stage, and then directing and tuning in the different light spots. And even just, you know, guiding the light team and having a cat joining us on the day. What I also found quite a lot of interest in the project is that because it's such a massive landmark within the center of Athens, I found it very fascinating. Try to chase for a few months the full moon. So I would actually, every month, I would actually try to plan and see where the full moon was going to be coming up from and try to locate myself at key points at a specific time within the night just to capture images that kind of look like that. But basically, this takes a lot of planning. Just a single shot, it's probably a couple of days worth of work just to see where you're supposed to be, what time you're supposed to be there, what lens you want to use, if the weather is going to be nice, if the weather conditions are going to allow you to take the photos, if it's going to be cloudy or not. I mean, this is the same with the old lighting. And I think the cloud did add quite a lot of drama to the photo itself. And also because it's from a slightly different angle, you will see that you can see people observing this amazing phenomenon, which is a photo that I couldn't capture a year later with the new lighting because the relative location of the moon and the earth has changed. So that was a very interesting experience of having to literally chase the exact position of the moon compared to the Parthenon. Now moving on to a few more projects. How are we doing from time? This is a permanent exhibition at Bletchley Park that traces the history of the Bombe machine. It might look more familiar if you guys have watched the film Imitation Game. So starting from the main entrance, I tried to capture the path where a visitor would actually follow when accessing the exhibition. And then again, going through the same sort of process of, I mean, I personally do that myself. I walk around and try to find those wide angle shots that capture the essence of a space, that actually give you the impression that you're standing there, that you're going to be able to navigate the space. You can tell which way you're coming, which way you're going, where everything is, and pretty much what to expect with each and every turn. I do find these shots a bit boring at first, but they do help me kind of give me the time while I'm in a space to actually see, okay, now that I've done the wide angle shots, I can go into more detail. Now I kind of understand the space myself. Now I can get a bit more focused on specific things. And in this instance, I would move a bit closer and focus on the displays, which sometimes on the wider angles get lost. And I mean, the lighting details on these displays are extremely very well done. Amazing integration. If you go a bit closer, you can actually see how the little spotlights have been integrated on the metal frames. And then taking a step back, making sure that those detail shots become more of a, okay, this is an item I recognize, this is the bomber machine, and basically now I have context, now I know the space, now I can understand exactly what I'm looking at, and I can read maybe a couple of the signs. In this specific exhibition, there was also a large-scale film that would actually project throughout the exhibition. So in this photo, you would see that if I take a long exposure of the film, everything is going to get washed out. So what I try to do in this instance is actually take a couple of long exposure so I can have more detail in the shadows. And then I would take a couple of faster shots to be able to, in post-production, superimpose a more of a static kind of frame. In this instance, more of a monochromatic frame with moving letters to add more drama and actually show that this is how, this is a bit more interesting. This is part of the story. Now, another project that I want to move on to, this is more of an exterior one. And exterior projects, they always have to be more carefully timed because there is a specific time within the day that you need to take the photos of exterior lighting to look at its best. And that's when you want the sky to get this like kind of this dark blue hues and kind of contrast the warm lighting that's usually on like a building facade. So for this one, I was invited to photograph the new color changing lighting scheme of the Debenhams facade in London. And it's a similar approach as the previous project that I talked about. I would always start with the wide angle shots that would show you the scale and the double decker buses and basically the sky and all that and how the sky complements the warm white lighting that's been used. But then I would want to move closer and get like details both of the lighting and the facade itself because the design and the engineering of this project is so well done again that a wide angle shot is never going to show that. So the key feature in this project was how the lighting will be able to actually change color and intensity and completely change what the building looks like during the evening. Now, again, in this project, I took a video. No, sorry, that's a lie. I didn't take a video. I actually took consecutive photos again of different sort of colors of the facade because that gives me the ability to actually have higher resolution of the end result and be able to much easier handle the production because colors change so fast and at such rates that basically if I try to take a video of that, there is so much more coordination that you need to have with the lighting programmer on the day just so they can give you the colors that you want at the speed that you want, at the rate that you want for the camera to work best. So I specifically asked to take specific photos of different lighting effects and moving effects and colors so I can go back in post and kind of make a film out of static images, which I always find a bit easier to work with. Now, the next project is that of an interior one, and it's photographing the guest rooms at the Bloomsbury Hotel in London. And again, same as always, we have wide angle shots followed by detail shots. Only this time, I was asked to actually photograph the hotel during the day, which means that you have mixing of different color temperatures. You have warm white lighting on the inside, and then you have cooler white lighting, the daylight on the outside, which is, I think it's always tricky to combine in a photo and make it look realistic and not like fake HDR, like a phone would actually have. So if you look at those side-by-side photos, I took them from different sort of rooms because I wanted to show design consistency, how the interior designers, by changing the materials and the color pattern, would actually be able to kind of give you another creative aspect of how you can make a room look so cool by a couple of small changes. And maybe in the side-by-side bed photo, you can see that the right-hand side one is closer to the window. It has more access to natural daylight, which means that the whole photo becomes bluer straight on from the camera. So if you want to fix that in post, there is a few ways to do that, but I always found that the best way to work around the color temperature difference is to take multiple exposure shots. So you have a photo that's kind of underexposed, which means that you photograph for what's happening on the outside. Then you have a photo which is decently exposed, and you have a much better range of light values from dark to medium to light. And then you have the overexposed image, which gives you the ability to get more detail in the shadow areas of a guest room. So if you go and blend this together, you get a much higher dynamic range that a single image can take, and much closer to what your eyes would actually see in a space like that. And then there is a bit of, just hiding sockets and cables and, bits and bobs that always look messy in a photo, but you can't really, remove for the shot. Another project, this is more of a product photography, but this time of custom design luminaires. This is a series of luminaires that I capture in the site-specific showroom. And the idea was to have a nice record of the light fixtures, which would be photographed in situ in the hotel they were designed for. And the concept was to show how the space gave design cues to the lighting designer, Anas Boku, and how the team was inspired to actually create custom luminaires that would work best for the space. So the showroom that I actually went to take the photos of the fittings, it's such an amazingly designed space by A31. I straight away fell in love with the architecture and the lighting. And if you see, it's more of a design space than a traditional lighting showroom, and it would be the perfect background for the first part of the photo shoot. I wouldn't say these are the more creative kind of photos that I would take at the beginning, but as I said, this is more of a documentation, more of a record. I try to take the photos of the luminaires in the exact same position, both switched on and switched off. This is more for consistency purposes. And then in case where you have both an up lighting and a down lighting component, again, combine both elements just more as a record. But then the architectural lighting and the materials of the space are inseparably connected, which means that drawing out special contrasts and highlights, this gave me tremendous creative freedom. So I tried to experiment a lot in order to come up with more kind of unique perspectives of how these light fixtures would fill in the space and how they would look against like concrete and kind of more like raw materials. Now, my favorite luminaire from the whole photo shoot was this battery-operated lantern, which I made sure to photograph in so many different places and from so many different angles, because for me, this is not just a luminaire, this is like a piece of art. I mean, look at it. So it's kind of creating various type of content from a single element that kind of becomes so challenging and fun at the same time. That is a process that, you build from taking the more, just like documenting kind of photos, and then you go into the creative side of things. And, the more you work in space and with a product, the more you kind of realize, the freedom that it gives you creatively. Now, photography is not just simply about reproducing reality. And photographs for me these days are not just documents. I mean, social media have changed the way that we look at things. And if you look at that specific photo, these two photos, if I would upload them on like social media, like Instagram, I would probably do an edit in that kind of sense, which means that you do kind of color grade if you want to go from a photo to a more like Instagram kind of looking photo. Now, photography these days, with photography, there is always, for me, something new to learn. And this continuous learning curve, I have found that just fascinates me, and it literally keeps me on my toes each and every time. And I really enjoy trying new things and exploring different perspectives. And I have found that having more of a subject versatility helps me with further develop my craft. So using different genre of photography, I try out different things always during my personal time, and this always influences my commercial work in ways that I wouldn't really expect. And with practice, you always become better, right? So it's funny because I once read, I don't remember where the quote is from, but I once read that photography is like any sport at professional level. I mean, you have to train daily if you want to be ready for game day. You can't just, go to a project, pick up the camera and start sort of making amazing photos. You have to keep practicing on a daily basis if you want to, if you want to stay warm. Now, for example, I like street photography because it can be extremely spontaneous. Trying to identify unique perspectives on a daily basis, chasing light and shadow, and how they play with each other, and try to time each and every moment perfectly, so you can tell a story with a photo. For me, it's always a goal, and waiting for the right moment when you see a shaft of light behind a bus. It's very similar to being in a lighting expo in Frankfurt and just waiting for the light silhouettes to pass by and create that sort of, just ghostly effect in sort of those, the backlit wall that says light digital, I think. So what I try to do is I always find inspiration from friends, from colleagues. I mean, I'm lucky enough to be working with so many different creative people, and you don't have to be a photographer. Every architect, every designer, they always have an amazing eye for unique photos and photography. So you just have to pay attention. You just look at what other people are doing, you get inspired, and you try to make that your own. You kind of change things up, to spice things up always. And photography has the capability to both record and reproduce, but also to produce completely new content each and every time. Now, with portrait photography, for example, things can get extremely intimate. You get to know the model, and that's going to make much better photos. It's all about communication. It's all about understanding what they see, what they feel, how to explain to them what you see through your camera, because they're standing. I mean, in this specific photo, the model Christina was actually standing probably something like 60 meters away from me. So trying to communicate the exact position in front of the sun, and the gesture, and how the silhouette is going to look, and how the wind is going to change to actually have that veil kind of blowing up. It's very difficult unless you actually have great ways of communicating. And the same goes with architecture. If possible, I like visiting the same space at different times of the day and just see how the building transforms with natural lighting. Now, the unique perspectives and the sense of scale that you can get with aerial photography is also extremely fascinating. It's only, I think, 4 or 5 years that drones have become commercially available, and it's a great way to actually have fun, but also create amazing photos and content. And basically, you can capture such amazing, perfect symmetries from the top-down photos that you wouldn't be able to get otherwise. And balancing nature and natural scenery with architecture, with huge architectural volumes, it always helps me personally see the bigger picture. So having new perspectives of large landscape and urban master plan projects can definitely benefit the design, both at planning stage, but also towards completion. Now, this is the lighting Syntagma Square in Athens, and this is the last project that I actually worked on fully as a lighting designer while at Lighting Design International. And when you're in Syntagma Square, these are the viewpoints that you can see from the ground, and these are quite your standard sort of perspectives that you have looking at the Greek Parliament and then towards Ermou Street. But then, if you want to get more of a perspective, I would have to climb on top of an adjustable hotel bar. This rooftop actually has amazing views. You can even see the Acropolis on the far right-hand side. And this is a vantage point that actually gives you context of how the square looks at night, not just when you experience it from the ground, but also how you would see that from high up. And that perspective with like a drone shot, you would never be able to get in any other way. Now, what I have included a few projects that I did recently, and I try to always keep things fresh. As in, I always try to have a few fun elements within like specific sort of photo shoots. This is 3 weeks ago. This is the new Gavriil jewelry store in Mykonos in Greece by Saints of Athens. And basically, this space is amazing. It looks like you're inside the bottom of a pool. It feels like that. You walk in and you expect for like water sounds to start going on. And the contrast between the cool lighting and the teal tiles and the red sort of bowl actually gives you this really summer indoor pool kind of scenario. But then I said, okay, this photo is amazing, but what if we actually, instead of having the ball sitting on the ground, what if you throw them in the corner? And that kind of that was a very spontaneous moment. I would actually take the photos and ask one of the girls working there. I said, "Can you just grab a couple of the inflatable balls and just throw them inside on the room, just in front of the camera?" And for me, I love this photo. I do love this photo. I mean, it took me something like 30 different tries to get the exact positions that I wanted, but it always adds a more fun element. It feels like, you know, there's like a play going on inside the store. Same context, different kind of project. This is a private residence in Athens by ArcZone. You have the living room and kitchen area, and this is like the night light kind of scenario. And then I wanted to capture what the space looks during the day. So all the lighting comes off, but then the space feels a bit flat. It's a house. You want to add light to it. You want to show human scale. You want to show movement. And then this is what happens. I asked one of the designers, Despina, to actually walk inside the frame. I mean, I was super happy with the perspective. I just didn't like how the right-hand side of the frame felt a bit empty. And I wanted to fill that negative space. And while I was taking this photo, if you see in the background, there's like a massive bowl with like lemons, and they're yellow and they're super striking. So then I asked, I said at that point, can you just try to grab the lemons and pretend you're falling over? And basically we came up with this idea. So with this photo, which in my mind, this is my favorite shot from that photo shoot. It was 3 different attempts. There is a bit of post-production, adding different lemons from different shots to kind of fill the frame exactly what they wanted. And we did have to pick them up each and every time, which was painful. And I think I should have photoshopped out the lemons in the background, because now you have 2 bowls. But anyway, but this is, for me, this is the fun element. This is how you add the playful kind of character in the photo. And again, another project. This is the International Airport in Athens. This is the new lighting for a new wing designed by ABW Architecture and Tobias and Associates, with lighting from Eleftheria Deco. And I love this photo. Again, you have leading lines. You can see the gradient of lighting in the windows and how they lead you to the control tower. But the road at the front is super boring in my mind. And what I did is I was waiting for literally 10 minutes for a taxi driver to pass by so I can add the leading lines in the frame, just because it just felt that there wasn't enough motion in the photo. And it was during COVID as well, so it wasn't that it was like packed with like tourists and everything, and like too many flights going on. So that did add to the composition. Now, what I want to move on is try to give you a couple of. I mean, these are not groundbreaking techniques. These are well known. I just put together a list of different sort of composition techniques that I don't really think about, but I do know that it's very interesting to be able to have as a list, and try, when taking a photo, to try different sort of things, because it does make a photo a bit more interesting. Just try to, you know, it's composition techniques that you can use 1, 2, or 3, or combine them, and the more you do them, the more they kind of come natural to you. So first one, the most basic one, is actually apply the rule of thirds. It's #1 all-time classic composition. You actually try for your subject to be 1/3 into the frame, or the other. Basically, if you divide the photo in half and you put the subject in the center, I think it's always dull. There's like very little photos that work that way. So the rule of thumbs, the rule of thirds always works. Again, similar sort of effect. The lines in this instance will intersect. So I'm just trying to get one of the windows out of the way. Now, the lines will intersect at 4 different points. And since the viewer's eyes are naturally drawn to those points, using this rule would actually, and placing your subject in one of those 4 points is going to make the scene always much more interesting. Also, sometimes placing the subject, as I said, in the center might be boring, but in this instance, you have a couple of circles just behind it, and you have letters in the background. So centering the subject could work, but only on specific occasions. Now, looking for triangles, I've read that online, actually. I never knew that I was doing that, but I found that I was subconsciously doing kind of trying to find symmetries and having different sort of triangles in the same sort of shots. They have a very strong visual impact. And it doesn't have to be literal triangles, but in this instance, because of the geometry of the lantern that I fell in love before, you can tell that I feel it's a very interesting photo. And again, same strategy. This is in Toulouse, slightly color graded image, but having 2 roof edges kind of making a triangle, and then have the tower just going through that with clouds in the background. It's a very, the viewer's imagination will actually connect the dots and will tie the different elements together. So you kind of try to lead them in specific parts of the image, the ones that you prefer and kind of work best. I think I was talking about this photo in the previous slide. Now, again, triangles, the triangle can be interrupted. This is a technique, again, it's a very old one, going like completely monochromatic and having color specific parts of the image. I think that's very 80s to 90s kind of style, but I do find that it works on specific sort of frames. The triangle in this instance might be interrupted, and there's like a massive tree trunk in the front, but the viewer's eye is going to fill in those gaps, and you don't need to show everything in your photo. Now, number 4 is consider your framing. Use natural frames if possible, if you want to draw attention to a specific part of your image. This is in a restaurant in London, and this is shooting through trees in Lesbos Island. Again, a very classic way to add a bit of interest, balance, and depth to a photo. Now, looking for symmetry and natural framing. In this instance, you have dense leaves, less dense leaves, and then a plane flying through. And that was a random shot, and it would look much more chaotic in color, but kind of removing color completely. You show contrast and you frame the plane with just like, the 2 leaves. It's as simple as that. Again, consider framing, man-made objects like doorways or LED structures in a lighting sort of festival, or occasionally you want to make your frames move. I think this is a video. So this is kind of what it looks like. As I said before, looking for symmetry always works. This is number 5. And symmetry is all about finding balance in your image, and the most simple type of symmetry is dividing the scene in half, either vertically or horizontally, and both halves have a very similar structure to them. Or, I mean, this is a very unique sort of composition. Symmetry is based on minimizing contrast, and well, this is not minimal, but basically it's almost like a perfect cross. I don't think it's super perfect. I think there's a bit of editing happened there. Now, juxtaposition is another nice composition technique. If you want to master the art of symmetry, you must consider size, shape, color, line, texture as elements to balance. So this is a lot of different sort of things that happen in this photo. And again, juxtaposition, again, in many ways is the opposite of symmetry. And you have things in different sort of planes, different distance from the camera. You have color, you don't have color, you have frames, you have a man standing. I think his striped socks are always there. I find them quite interesting with kind of how the frames are in the background. I mean, I might be the only one paying attention to these things. And in juxtaposition, you want to create contrast within your frame using non-symmetrical elements. And the most common way to achieve this is to place or arrange a subject in adjacent or opposing locations and highlight their differences. And however placement you have of your subject, it's critical for that effect to work as long as the comparison that you make is evident and the contrast is very vivid. And in this instance, I think the shaft of light on the lighting the girl on the right is actually quite crucial because you have shade and then you have all the people climbing down the mountain. Now, another classical composition technique is to look for leading lines. Literal or implied lines create a path, and the viewer is always going to start from the beginning of the line, leading all the way into and having the people sort of crossing the trail lines across. I mean, the leading lines can come in different shapes and forms. It can, the lines can lead the viewer's eyes to the subject or into infinity sometimes. They can be straight, they can be curved, they can be angular. A photograph may have one leading line or more. I think practice is going to help you with that a lot. And sometimes I do take the exact same photo again and again and again, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. This is another technique. It's called number 8 is use diagonal lines, which you have a jeep that is moving. The shutter speed is very fast, so it feels that it's stopped, but the two diagonal lines make it feel like it's moving. I mean, in my mind. And again, the diagonal can extend from one side of the photograph to the other, or it could actually intersect in the middle. Technique number 9 is try to incorporate curves. And curving a line can soften an image and convey more of a natural kind of organic look to a photo that kind of lends itself perfectly to landscape, architecture, drone and urban photography. You can use curves to convey a sense of calm or kind of lead the viewer's eye to a journey whose destination actually lies beyond the photograph. I mean, in this instance, you can't really tell where the road is heading. At some point, it just vanishes, but it kind of invokes you a sense of wonder. You want to try and find out what happens at the end of the road. Number 10, keep the background very simple. Either that's black or either that's white. Sometimes you want to show contrast. Sorry, sometimes you want to let the background show context, and in this instance, you want to have building on top of building on top of building. And I saw that photo before, but you had a stream of water that leads to the tower bridge. And this is your context. Everything else is a bit darker. And the first thing that I would notice is the tower bridge in the background. And then the next photo, again, this is more than one technique. You use the background to show context. You frame the subject. You have people in motion. It's different techniques that actually make that photo a bit more interesting. And then again, you want the action in the background to be visible, but you also want it not to be too distracting, to kind of overwhelm the composition. In this instance, I don't know, perfect lockdown photo. London is closed. I don't know how I call that. Another trick is to use a horizon line that is higher than what you would normally expect, or the complete opposite. You can actually use a horizon that's actually lower than you would actually have. And if you want to emphasize the sky, you can use the low horizon line, because this technique can be used to convey the vastness of heavens or the insignificance of your subject. I mean, how small this guy is, like carrying, I think, suitcases in, I want to say Bolivia. I can't remember. Number 14 is adding depth using distant objects and having a point of interest in the foreground, the middle ground, and then in the far distance having something, maybe a mountain, maybe a bit of snow on the mountain, does give more depth to your composition. Same thing here. Again, another technique is to add a person or a subject that would make a landscape more dazzling or illustrates the vastness, the vast size of the building compared to someone standing next to it. The object have to be large enough to be discernible and to catch the viewer's eye, but not so prominent to kind of distract from the subject and the landscape. Now, number 16, shoot from unusual vantage points. This was shot with a drone. Both 4 models in the photo didn't drown, either though we got way too close to that to get the photo. This is a kind of an unexpected shot. I took it a few years ago, and it was fidget spinners were actually very popular those days, and the colors on the sea were amazing. The sun was quite low, so I thought trying to replicate that effect with like a donut inflatable kind of object, and then having the 4 kind of models kind of symmetrically placed around it. And again, getting low if necessary to change your focal point. Now, contrast and light is key to avoiding flat images that kind of look kind of dull and one note. So this is silhouettes and you have a sunset. This is more of a lighting in an abandoned building and a staircase, which is quite creepy. And I didn't stay there for too long because I think I got creeped out as well. Another technique is to use contrast colors that can energize a photograph, but makes a big difference in light and shadow. This again was kind of random. That was in Machu Picchu, a group of 10 of us, and one of the girls in the center, she's a photographer as well, and she was focusing somewhere while everyone else was looking at me taking a photo, and I think she was the main subject. That was a very fun moment to capture. And I mean, in post-production, I did have to darken parts of the image to kind of accentuate the object, but it makes a huge difference, I think. Number 18, use repetition to your advantage. An object or a shape can repeat and create a dominant pattern. So try to capitalize on those patterns to create a very calm and rhythmic feeling, create a complete abstraction with like common objects, something like that. Number 19 is to get very close. I think it was Robert Capa that said, if your photographs aren't good enough, you're not close enough. So try to get close sometimes and just focus on detail. Like this light bulb, one of my favorite of all time. If you want to get the composition you need, sometimes you have to get really, really close. And last but not least, you want to show interaction. You want to show dynamics in a composition. You want to show people standing still and have a certain and have authority in these systems, and then a couple walking out of a museum during a protest. And this is the interaction between subjects, and it kind of produces a sense of being in the moment. This is during a photo shoot for rehearsals of a ballet. And basically you have the dancers, you have the lighting designer trying to explain where the dancers need to be and do kind of their routine, because it does make a massive difference if you want to highlight them. And I think I'm going to finish off the presentation with a personal project that I'm running on at the moment. I've called it 9 degrees, and I'm going to get a bit into detail on that later. But basically, it's the degrees that you have the sun when it hits the horizon during sunset. When it's above the horizon for 9 degrees, you have the golden hour. When it's below the horizon, 9 degrees, it's in the middle of the nautical twilight. So it's when you go from daylight to nighttime in consecutive sort of photos. And this is how the exact same kind of photo is going to change throughout the day, and how it's going to bring the blue in the sky is going to start coming on, the light on the buildings is going to start coming on, and then your composition kind of progresses. And I do find that lighting during the night, it kind of calms me a bit more because I can focus. During the day, everything is lit. Everything can be a photo, but during the night, whatever is lit, it kind of focuses your attention on that. And this is what fascinates me with the photo. And it kind of helps me kind of narrow down my field of view. And with that photo from Athens, I think I'm gonna wrap up the presentation. I think we're just about okay with time. And thank you for joining me. I hope that was somewhat interesting. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. I think an hour just to talk about photography and lighting is never enough. I try to squeeze too many projects, too much information in an hour. But yeah, I'm open to any sort of questions that you guys have, and hopefully you find that interesting.
Gavriil, thank you very much for this inspiring lecture. If you have any questions, please use the chat, and I will moderate the discussion and the questions with Gavriil. So it was very interesting to see a wider range of different projects, different also techniques of work. I would like to know a little bit more how social media influenced your view about photography. You spoke a little bit about the access to media and the expectation of clients. In which way did it change your personal view of observing, analyzing your environment?
I would say that's a twofold question. Basically, I think I got into photography more the past few years because I would constantly get more engaged and interact with like photos of projects. And social media is actually, it's giving you access to so much information, right? So you see more, you get inspired more, you want to do more things. And that kind of trains my eye of how I'm going to take a photo of a project. It's actually funny, whenever I go anywhere for either for work or holidays, if I want to take photos, I would go on Instagram probably, and I would do a search with geotag, and I would do a quick kind of browse through what photos people have taken from that specific area, because it's the best research as you can get. You have a very smart algorithm showing you photos and what works, what doesn't work, and then you know kind of where to be and when to be, and then you work on that. So it's almost having a collective amount of people doing the research and the scouting for you. Now, in terms of social media, I mean, clients, it's not about taking photos. It's about, you know, making videos. It's about making photos that work with specific sort of, you know, having a photo printed in a magazine, you go more of a landscape, but having social media, you go more of a portrait kind of scenario, which means that your framing changes. If you want to go from an aspect ratio of 3:4 or 2:3 to a 4:5 in portrait, it's a completely different photo. So you have to reframe. If you know that someone is going to use that photo for social media mainly, there is no reason for the end photo to look tiny on a screen on a phone. So you kind of adjust yourself to your client's needs and basically what they're going to be using the photo for. I'm not sure if I answered your question. But...
No, that's really helpful. Thank you. Another question would be also directed into the field of technology with your experiences of drones the last 4 to 5 years, what you mentioned in your talk. So when looking at these photos, often it feels like it's a play of geometry and perspective, that this is the main content and playing with this kind of fields. Is there some kind of new story there to have this very artificial perspective, which is not something what we normally would perceive? Do you see it sometimes? You're in the one square you explained the lighting concept for a large square to understand this. What kind of storytelling is coming up for you when you work with drones?
I think it's more of a unique perspective, because when you design the lighting for a building, for example, you know where you're going to be standing, you know where you're going to be experiencing the building and the lighting of the building like under normal circumstances, which means that your normal photos is what people would expect. So when you start using a drone, you kind of elevate your viewer's eye. You get access to locations that you wouldn't be normally able to access. I mean, unless you have like a helicopter or like a telephoto lens and like a vantage point far away, it gives you angles and perspectives that feel unique. And I think that draws your eye. If you have the same, if you photograph the same building and one of them is from the ground and one of them is like from higher up at an angle, like looking down, people are gonna pay more attention to the photo they're not gonna be able to get themselves, in my mind, because otherwise it feels a bit. If I can take the photo, if anyone can take the same photo, it's not as unique anymore. So I personally always strive to try and take with every project one or two photos that no one else has taken before, or it's not as easy to take. And that's why it takes the extra effort. Either that's a drone, or it's like maybe some sort of video, or some sort of like using a telephoto lens and being from a really far away just to get that sort of compression in the photo, or it's trying to do something which is more unique. And drones and access to drones these days have made that more possible. I mean, there's always regulations, and we always have to oblige to these things, and be very careful when operating, like flying helicopters and stuff like that. But again, technology these days, not just with drones. You have drones, you have 360 cameras, you have underwater cameras, you have things that otherwise you wouldn't be able to get back in the day. And you always want to be a step ahead of what everything else is making if you want to stay relative, and you want to kind of, just make your content look a bit more interesting. And that's, I do that for myself mainly, but this is always, clients want that as well. Fellow designers want that as well, because they want to see their work from a perspective and with a fresh set of eyes that they wouldn't be able to, they haven't thought about before. So drones are crucial.
I see. Thank you very much. A question from the audience is, what is the typical time relation between planning a scene, making the pictures, and then the post-production, modifying the images later in Photoshop and other programs? Can you just give us an example of one or two projects, what your timing is in preparation, photo session, and post-production?
Sure. I think if we go back to the photo, for example, I might just mess that up completely. I'm going to try to change the slide. Just give me a sec. I know exactly what photo I'm going to be using. I'm not sure if you can see the slide that I've put on the screen.
That's the moon shooting, which you prepare there from the Acropolis?
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. I'm using that specifically just to show the amount of planning and time that goes into something like that. This is a project that I've known for quite some time, so I've spent a lot of time knowing where to be and when to be. But when it comes to planning the shot, if it's too complicated, you want to know ahead of, is it a nighttime shot that you want to take? If so, it has to be after the sun has set. You probably have to be during the nautical twilight, which is something like 20 minutes to half an hour after the sun has set. And you just cannot arrive there at that point, because you're only going to have maybe 10, 15 minutes to get the shot. So you have to go either the night before, or if you're confident enough, the day, during the day a bit earlier. So planning, I would say, is probably something like 50% of the final photo, because you spend the amount to know where to be, when to be, what gear to use, what the weather is going to be like. Is there going to be traffic? Am I going to have people? Do I need to ask permissions? So all of that is like 50% of the photo. The actual photo, I mean, for me, is probably another 10%. If it's an exterior one, because it's an existing project, I'm not going to set the scene. I'm not going to have to move anything around or do any fine tuning. And then another 40% would be the post-production. So in this instance, this photo would be going there on a Wednesday afternoon, see when the moon is coming up the day before the full moon, probably spend an hour there, knowing the exact position it's going to be, using an app to know the same position it's going to take the following day, because everything changes within a day, and then leaving and then going a second day to take the one shot, which means that another 2 hours to get there, take the photo and go back. And post-production for something like that, this is, I think it's 3 different exposures for the temple of Victory of Nikki, and another 3 exposures for the full moon, because cameras these days, they don't really have the dynamic range just yet to capture the detail what you want. So that's probably like an hour and a half of editing. just to get it right. I mean, for me. So I would say overall, that's 4 hours of planning, half an hour of shooting, and maybe 2 hours of editing for just a single photo. If it's an interior photo and it's a restaurant, I would say again, planning is not that. I mean, you can notify the client via email, but then you have to be there. You have to spend a lot of time kind of aligning chairs, cutlery, tables, adjust the lighting, making sure that there's no stuff that what's happening on the outside. Is that a business hour? And then the photo shoot takes some time because you do move things around all the time. And then editing again depends on how many photos you want in the end. But I do try to get the final photo as close to what I capture as possible, because you don't want to have to be deleting things, erasing things, adjusting things in post production. You want to get like as effortlessly as you need to the final photo.
This leads us to the next question, which somebody's asking. When do you correct the perspective of distortion in the photo? So because some of the photos looked a little bit corrected while others left as they were. And how do you deal with these kind of vertical lines in a building and shifted perspective when it's very hard to achieve a specific angle which you would like to capture a scenery where you might have some kind of obstacles? So how do you deal with these kind of correcting the perspective to make it straight lines or not straight lines?
There is two ways to do that. The first one, if you want to correct the lines, the vertical lines for architectural photography in situ, you would use a tilt shift lens. So basically, if you have a building and you're shooting up, you kind of tilt the frame for the verticals to be vertical. That's a nice way to do it, and you don't lose information in that, because when you correct the exact same composition in post, that means that when you tilt up, you start losing pixels in the bottom part of your corner. I do go with the second, most of the times with the second sort of option, because I try to frame in such a way that I don't have to do too much correction of my verticals. I mean, I would do the occasional aligning and horizontals and all that, because sometimes, especially if it's a fast-moving project, if it's a restaurant, you have 2 hours to take all the photos. I would occasionally miss a couple of shots and they're not perfectly aligned, which you can always adjust in post, and the photo looks the exact same. It's not going to change much. But these days, cameras have so much high resolution that even if you correct in post-production and you have to crop a bit of pixel in the end result photo is still large enough to be printed in on a massive billboard. You don't have any issues with resolution. But again, as I said, you either do that using a tilt shift lens, which is more specialized, or you do that in post-production. And there's always ways. I mean, sometimes you don't want to correct your line. Sometimes you want to have that sort of curviness or sideness. It depends on the story you want to tell. But for architectural, I think straight verticals and parallel lines actually works best. People expect to see that. I mean, if you see a photo that's a bit crooked, for me, it sounds like non-professional.
Yeah, I see. Another question regarding the post-production. What is your ethical limit? How much you edit and change a photo to make it perfect for you or the client? Are there some kind of mental limitations where you say, I don't want to go so far, or that's the limit? How far do you go with post-production in your work, and what are your guidelines to keep it naturalistic or natural?
It's fine, because I would, in terms of ethicality, I would mainly refer to people that actually do post-production, like model photography, and then you would say that you would probably correct from a portrait. You might delete like a zit, that's something like a temporary, that's like it's going to be there for a week, and it happened to be during the photo shoot, but I wouldn't remove a mole, something that's like characteristic of a person. So when it comes to photographing a building, if I can remove the traffic, cones, dust bins, any sort of dirt that shouldn't supposed to be there, before even taking the photo, I would do that. It makes my life easier. But sometimes if it's too tricky to remove something that it's not supposed to be there, and it's easy to do, I don't see it as unethical to kind of make the composition a bit cleaner, because there's like practical reasons. Now, in terms of correcting things, I have been asked I do get asked occasionally, if something didn't go right inside, can you delete that? Can you remove that? Most of the times, it's not something that I would feel uncomfortable with. I mean, ethically, because technically, sometimes it's impossible to fix everything. But I think, you have a busy ceiling, right? You will try to remove a crack. I would never remove lighting. I would never maybe remove speakers. But sometimes if it thinks that it's an accident that we're not supposed to happen, or if you're asked to take the photos, 2 days before they finish the project, and the project is going to look different after the end, that means that you get it at that point. But I try not to. I never fake things. I never do. Even the photo of the full moon in this photo, if someone asked me to do that with a single photo, I would say, no, that's impossible. This is like 6 different photographs, because there's no way I can take a photo of the full moon and the building and one of them not to be overly exposed. So I would have to take a photo of one and superimpose the other behind it. And that's faking it, but it's a composition, because your eye is gonna experience that. The camera can never get there. So for me, the ethical is, if I can see it with my eye, then I can make it happen, in post-production. I try to be careful about, not to add too many things or, remove things that are not supposed to be there.
Okay, thank you very much for this inspiring lecture with a lot of information regarding photo composition, how you deal with light and space, and also sharing your view there, which is helpful to understand how one could actually develop maybe a lighting design scheme, and also think in the wide view and then with the close-ups. So overall, thank you very much that you shared your insights with us, and all the best to you. Thank you very much, Gavriil.